Okay, we're here with From Prototyping to Production with Rawrz Toys and Formlabs, and I'd like to thank everyone for joining us this lovely Thursday afternoon. My name is Will Walker, and I do events and design here at Formlabs, and I'm joined by JP Shipley and Sam Jacoby, and we're going to be we're really excited today because we're talking with Rawrz Toys. And so this dynamic duo, if you haven't heard of them already, includes Ann Sidenblad and Victoria Rose, and they're going to be going over their awesome custom boutique toy business, Rawrz Toys, as well as describing their process. So today we're going to cover a couple of things. We're just going to do an intro to the Form 1 because I know there's a couple of people on line today who are looking to learn more about our printer, cover some of the upcoming events that will be happening, and then we'll give it over to the Rawrz Toys ladies to do their demonstration discussion, prototyping to production with Rawrz Toys. At the end, we're going to have a Q&A session. So anybody who's watching online, if you find this content interesting, we just want to mention that we have done several webinars so far, including introducing the Form 1, finishing your print, and performing with Preform. And all of those webinars are available through our events.formlabs.com/webinars page. In particular, finishing your print might be a great follow-on to this episode. So anybody who is listening to this episode and has questions for us, please feel free to ask questions through the Google Hangout or YouTube comments. We'll take those questions that are relevant to the section and answer as best as we can. We'll be answering the questions at the end, so if we don't get to your question, we'll be sure to address them in a subsequent webinar. And that really helps us out in terms of determining what kind of content that you'd like to have in the future. So at this moment, I'd just like to go into the details about the Form 1. The Form 1, what is this printer and who are we? So the Form 1 is different than other desktop 3D printers on the market in that it provides an affordable yet professional solution to rapid prototyping and 3D printing. We're really proud of the fact that we've put together a very intuitive software package that allows you to bring your part in an STL or OBJ file format, and will automatically generate the supports for you and get your part ready to print. And really, our software is designed to get out of your way and get you printing within minutes. We're also very excited about our growing range of resins. Recently, we launched our white resin, and there are more colors on the way, as well as other formulations. This is one of the real advantages of stereolithography printing, which is what we do, is that you can swap in different formulations or different types of resins and get different colors or different materials properties. So in terms of our printer, the essential specifications are the build volume, which is 4.9 by 4.9 by 6 inches, the fact that we use a resin to print with, so it's a liquid plastic that then gets solidified as the printing process occurs, and that our minimum feature size is about 300 microns, which is about 1/3 of a millimeter. Our layer heights go all the way down to 25 microns, and our print cost, or print per part, if you take it in terms of cubic centimeters, it's about 14.9 cents per cubic centimeter. We're really proud of the fact, and we really like the fact that we use stereolithography. This is really a high-resolution version of 3D printing. And what it allows you to do is get very intricate detail, but if you look at the two slides here, you can see that when you take identical layer thicknesses, so 100 micron layers on our printer and 100 micron layers on another desktop 3D printer, we get a much smoother surface finish and much finer detail. And that kind of quality really gives you a better part for prototyping. There's less cleanup involved, and we're going to see now how you can take a part coming out from the Form 1 and actually turn it directly into a prototype for production. So we've got a couple of things coming on up, and I want to just invite everyone who's listening to this out. We're going to be at Maker Faire Bay Area. This is one of our marquee events for the year. It's happening at the San Mateo Convention Center in San Francisco, May 17th to the 18th. And we've got a lot of great things going on there. We'll be doing live printing demos at 11 o'clock and 3 o'clock. And Rawrz Toys will be coming to visit at 5 p.m. every evening to just go over their parts. We're going to have some of their parts on display. And they'll be able to answer any questions anybody has about finishing or painting or achieving really awesome parts. We're also going to be at SolidCon, which is also in San Francisco. That's happening right on the heels Maker Fair on May 21st and the 22nd. We'll be working with Nervous Systems, which is a design group here in Boston. They make awesome, algorithmically customizable jewelry, and we'll actually be printing that out on the show floor. So we hope that some of the people listening in might be in the area and can stop on by. So at this point, I'm going to turn the wheel over to our guests, Rawrz Toys, and let them introduce themselves as well as talk about their process. So Anne and Victoria, are you there?
Hi.
Hello, everyone.
All right, well, take it away.
Hi. Thanks again for joining. For those who haven't been introduced to Rawrz Toys before, what is Rawrz Toys? Rawrz Toys is a toy line created by myself, Victoria Rose, and my business partner, Anne Sidenblad. And what we've done is we've created a line of 7 whimsical creatures, from narwhals to octopuses to giraffes. These are our characters right now, and we try every year to keep creating different characters. So if you have a character that you're interested in, write it in the comments. We're always looking to grow our brand. We also offer a ton of different accessories, so you can personalize your toys, from top hats to mohawks to bow ties. All of our toys are hand painted and handmade by us. Here we have some form printed wings that we've added to our toys. And these are some of our giraffes. And so we just make a toy that is about the love that we have for creating something intricate and handmade. And you know, this is our octopus. We're very inspired by gummy things and other types of things. Pirates. And who is Rawrz Toys? Anne?
So, my name is Anne, and I'm a 3D modeler in the film industry. I've been working in films for about 10 years now, and I started in live action on movies like Golden Compass and Night at the Museum. From there, I hopped over to all CG films on movies like Christmas Carol and most recently Mr. Peabody and Sherman. I'm a big fan and collector of toys. I like independent art toys, design toys, action figures, collectible statues, pretty much anything you name it, I love it. And so I was very excited to be able to create my own line of toys as well. But I never had the full skill set. I could design and I could 3D model, but partnering up with Victoria was great because we have very complementary skills. Over to you, Victoria.
Yeah, and so when Anne and we worked actually on a stop motion feature together, what I do is I create puppets for stop motion films. So that is everything from wiring the tiny hands to molding and casting. Anne was the head of the modeling department on a film we were working for, and I had to often work with Anne to create models for puppets, and we realized that we actually had a really good working relationship for translating design to model. And Anne had seen some of my sketches on Post-it notes, and she was like, you know, I'm really interested in creating a toy, and I think that these would lend themselves really well to making a toy. How would you like to go into business together? And from there we grew. And you know, from there, this is how we create Rawrz Toys. We start with my sketches, and we spend a lot of time deciding which character we want to make. The first character we made was the narwhal, and it was kind of something we both really responded to, and it was whimsical and cute and fun for us. And Anne was really great, and she took the sketches that I had, and she not only took what I thought was a really great design element, but she was able to add things and improve upon it in a way that I couldn't think three-dimensionally. So I'll let Anne talk a little bit about that here.
So here is the 3D models of our toys that we have, some of our toys that we have right now. As Victoria mentioned, the narwhal was the first one, and shortly after came the octopus and the seahorse. And these were modeled in Maya, and I use Maya primarily because that's what I use every day as my day job, so I'm most familiar with it. But these could be created in any other software such as Blender or ZBrush as well. When we design our toys, we try and keep similar elements across them so that our whole toys work cohesively as a line. For example, if you look at the seahorse tail, it has that kink in it, and the elephant trunk has a very similar kink to it, which kind of gives them all a similar feel. The body shapes also have a bit of like rounded bellies, followed by crisp lines that delineate form changes in them, and that just kind of gives them an overall cohesiveness. We also like to have a little bit of whimsy in all of our characters. One eye is always bigger than the other, and it just kind of adds to the fun. And when we build our characters, we don't build specific traits and storylines into our characters. For example, our octopus, we don't build him and say he's going to be the hero of our characters and a leader of the pack and build that into the character design. What we do is we build the model to be a platform for the paint, and then the paint can create a variety of personalities on the characters. So for example, we might paint the octopus to look like a watermelon, which gives him like kind of a small, cute look, and then another octopus might be painted with big car paint flames up his legs, which gives him a much bolder feeling. Next page. So after we've designed the model, we split it up to be printed and casted. And when we print it, or when we split it up, we have two main considerations. Ease of mold and casting, as well as the ease of the final look and assembly. For example, when we first did the whale, we knew that we wanted to split it top and bottom to make it easier for casting, but we had the teeth as a part of the top of the whale and the tongue as a part of the lower part of the whale. And when it came time to painting, it was a nightmare because we always had to paint the teeth white and they just looked a little lumpy and not very clean. So the next iteration we did, we broke the teeth and tongue out into separate pieces, and now we always cast the teeth in white and the tongue in pink, and it just gives a much better finished looking product. So how I create those splits in the whale is a little bit of a puzzle. This is an example of how I do it. I build the Boolean pieces in Maya. So for example, the blue is representing a piece that's going to be subtracted out to create the upper part of the whale, and that clear red piece is representing the piece that's going to delete the upper part of the whale to create the lower whale. That solid red cylinder that's at the top, that's going to be subtracted out of my whale form, and it's going to create the peg that the narwhal horn will fit into. So I take all these objects in Maya, and I like to do it in Maya because I feel it gives me like infinite control and ability to iterate really easily, because I can slice up the model, check it out. If I want to make any adjustments, I go right back to my Maya model. So I export all these pieces out of Maya, and then I can bring them into a program that can do Booleans. You can use ZBrush, or a more professional Booleaning software might be Magix or NetFab. And from there, I can split apart the whale using these pieces that I've created. Here are our whales on the 3D printer. All of the pieces are right there. And what we love about the Form 1 is that it allows us to iterate more quickly and cheaply. For example, when we created some of our earlier characters, we needed to send the prints out to be printed, and that had a higher cost and a much slower turnaround. So we were really hesitant to like iterate, and we never quite got as many versions as we wanted to. But by having the printer myself, I'm able to just iterate to my heart's content and really get the prototypes back a lot faster. So we're going to walk you through creating our alligator right now. This is the 3D model for the alligator on the top is how I built it. But when you send it to the printer, it's actually going to print every face as a faceted object. So if I were to send that upper alligator to the printer, it would be a very faceted alligator. So I smoothed it. In this case, I smoothed it 3 times. And it depends on how large you're going to print it as to how many times you need to smooth it. Because these are fairly small, I felt 3 times was enough. And so that lower alligator is about 100,000 faces overall, so it's not too dense. And if you are a Maya user, you'll notice on that top wireframe on the back fin, there's those dark edges on the wireframe. And what I'm using there is the Maya crease tool, which means that when I smooth it, it's going to keep the edge crisp, because normally you have to add extra edge loops to hold the form when you smooth it, but the crease tool allows you to keep a crisp edge without adding those edge loops. Here's our gator on the preform software. For these guys, because they're fairly small, I find that I'm able to usually use fewer supports than is default and also a smaller touch size. But that kind of depends on the print that you're printing. And so I found that over time you kind of get a sense as to like what you can dial the sliders into, because you don't want to over support it, because then you'll have a little more marks that you'll have to clean up later on. But if you have too few, then you risk failure. So I found that, you know, it's just kind of a learning and feeling thing, and you'll get the hang of that. Here's two alligators fresh off the printer. These ended up becoming masters for our molds that Victoria is going to get into showing you how we did.
As Anne talked about before, we had our first iteration of the gator, and we ended up making about 3 different design passes, and then printing the alligator again and once more. And what was great about the form is that we were able to do that quickly and cost effectively. You can see on this iteration of the alligator that he actually has on his back 2 separate like rows of fins, and we went in and actually decided to change it to be 1 fin across the entire back. We felt that it was more aesthetically pleasing and looked cleaner. You can also see that we made the legs a little longer, and then brought the front legs forward. And as Anne had also mentioned, we like our characters to kind of have a little belly, and so we went back and gave the alligator more belly. We also had gotten some comments early on that he looked banana-ish, and we always like to take a pass where we take some of our prototypes and we paint them, because we find when we apply color to them, we get a better feel for how it's going to look as a final product. And this alligator, although we thought it was cute that he looked banana-ish, it just wasn't quite right for the rest of the line. So we made all of the design changes, and then we printed a couple different size options. Another thing that's great about the form is we sometimes we don't know what scale we're going to want, and so we printed a very small version that was about 1/2 inch, a medium version that was 1.5 inches, and an even bigger version that was 2 inches. We're able to go through and find which size works best for us. You can see here, these are some of the different sizes of the alligators. We're using the form now to actually print larger showpieces that are about 5 inches in size. And what is great about that is our toys, although we love that they're small, it's really hard at a show like Maker Faire to see them from far away. And so what having bigger pieces does is it actually enables people to see our product from further away, and entices them to journey over and look at our toys. And so the way that we clean up the parts is I like to start with, we dip it in an alcohol bath, and then while it's still kind of sticky, I rub it with a cotton swab or a cotton ball and kind of work out some of the texture. And then we introduce it to the sun. Usually leave them outside for a little bit so that they can post-cure. We then add primer. And we use an auto primer, and the reason for this is that an auto primer, it works really well in the sun. It's designed for freezing and getting hot. I went on a trip to Michigan recently with a ton of toys, and when I got out of the airport, they had gotten really cold, and a lot of the toys had actually unglued and some of the paint had chipped off, and this was a problem I hadn't experienced before. Living in California, it doesn't get extreme cold like that, and so we specifically use different primers and paints that work well together to be tempered to UV and hot and cold. So once we have the primer, we go through and we hand sand and clean. I like to use sandpaper varied from 400 grit to 1,000, starting with a thicker and ending with a thinner. And then for the final step, I actually use a 000 steel wool and use that to get rid of the egg shelling that's left from the primer. We then use spray paints. I prefer Tamiya spray paint. I prefer this over an airbrush, mostly because I don't like the time involved in cleaning an airbrush out. So the spray paint works for, we do so many different colors. We have hundreds of looks that having spray paint in cans makes it easy to go back and forth from characters. I also use a heat lamp to help cure the paint quicker. because our objects are so small, we can get away with that. Once we have the gator finished, we then design our box to create a mold. Some of our characters are more advanced and they need a sprue system. I'll go over that in a little bit with the elephant. For now, I kind of wanted to just go over the molding process with a really simple silicone mold. So we make the box, and then I usually use pins to secure the side of the box, and then hot glue around it. You can see here I'm hot gluing the alligator in place. I also put tape on the inside of my foam core. This actually helps keep the mold clear. I use specifically a clear silicone so that you can see through the mold. This helps with the injection process and seeing any flaws. So the tape actually helps make a smooth surface, and it keeps the mold more see-through. You can see here I'm pouring the silicone. I prefer smooth-on products, specifically smooth-on Sorta Clear 37. It has a set time of about 4 hours, but this can be accelerated by putting it in the oven. We also use a vac chamber to remove bubbles from the silicone, and then once we pour the mold, I put it in a pressure pot with about 10 pounds of pressure. You can see in this picture on top of the alligator there's some surface bubbles. Those will actually disappear when we put it in the pressure pot. You want to make sure that you use a light amount of pressure when putting silicone into a pressure pot. If you were to use 30 and 40 pounds of pressure like with resin, it would actually cause the silicone to burst out of the mold and be counterproductive to what you're trying to achieve. You can see here this is the mold post-cured. So the top left is the alligator inside the silicone. He's then been removed on the right, and then the bottom is some teal alligators that have been cast with liquid plastic. And you can see in the teal how the tape really helped to see through the mold. And then here's a finished gator. The Viking hat is actually printed directly on the form. We use the form to print a lot of tiny accessories to make our toys more personal. And then, so to go over molding again with a sprue system, here is the 3D model of our elephant. Anne's removed the ears. The ears presented a really big undercut. And although his trunk and his horns also make a big undercoat, I'm actually able to cut the mold directly down the center of the trunk and pull up and away, whereas with the ears it would be so hard to cut around them that it's just easier to mold them separate. You can see here these are 3D printed elephants. They need to be sanded and primed as well. You can see a little bit of the texture. These are our elephants. They've been primered and sanded and they're ready to be molded. And then once we have our product ready to be molded, typically what I'll do is I'll set it down on a piece of paper and I'll think about the way that the resin is going to flow through the object. So in this case, if you look at the top of the page as the top of the mold, I would inject resin into the metal piece. It would go down the metal and up into the elephant, and then I would then add vents off the bottom of his feet. So it kind of helps me get a comprehensive understanding of how the resin is going to flow. And this is the part that's hardest about mold making. It kind of took me years of experience, but I kind of try to think about it from any point where air might get trapped. So like his feet are a high point and the tip of his tail is a high point. Once I've decided where I want to add the vents, you can make your sprues in 2 different ways. You can hand make them like they are here with metal, plastic, toothpicks, or you can actually print sprues. A little later we've got a picture of a sprue system that was modeled in Maya and then printed out. Each way is personal preference, honestly. The paint stir stick on the bottom, that acts as a reservoir. So if you think of this mold, the way when you box a mold, it's always upside down, and then when you cast it, it'll get flipped around. So you can see that you would inject in the bottom of the paint stick into the metal. The liquid plastic would flow up into the elephant and out his feet into the paint stick. And what the paint stick does is it acts as a reservoir storing extra resin. So in the event that you have air bubbles that are burping later in the pressure pot, you have extra resin that can get introduced back into your objects. Here's another version of handmade sprues. This one, I actually went as far as to add a syringe at the edge of the metal, and this just adds an extra security of when I put the syringe in place, it'll hold it in place better than if I just was injecting into the metal. You can see here the elephants have been boxed and the silicone is cured and they're ready to be cut. And typically I use a simple jeweler's cut for my molds. You can see the tools here. On the right side is a pair of mold splitters, and the left is a scalpel. I prefer a number 11 blade. And then in this picture you can see these are actually some teeny tiny pirate hats and birthday hats that we've molded. And yeah, basically I very carefully put the mold splitters in the side of the mold, and then I cut back and forth. I like to use a really jagged cut on the outside of my mold so that it locks back together, as opposed to just one straight cut, because one straight cut on the exterior will actually, it'll want to slip apart. So I create a really jaggedy cut for the very outside of the mold, and then on the inside I cut a little bit tighter. Another thing that I like to do is for some characters it's easier to outline the character with a Sharpie or some kind of marker. That way when you're cutting you can see exactly where the object is going to be. This is also an example of a sprue system that was modeled in the computer and printed out on a 3D printer. And if you look at his tail, you can see that I've added some toothpicks. That's because I actually didn't anticipate that his tail would get air bubbles. And so what's great about 3D printing, but also you know, found objects, is that you can modify it after the fact before you go to mold. Here's the giraffe mold that's been cut open. So as you can see on the very outside, there's a very jagged cut, but then as you get more inside towards the giraffes themselves, it's a lot smaller of a cut. This mold is ready for injecting liquid plastic, and so I'll spray it with a release. I actually prefer Man 200 release, and you can see here we also use smooth on plastics. Smooth on 300s was what we started with, but now we actually use a product that's 65D, and we mix the two parts together and inject it into our molds. It has about a working time of about 2.5 minutes and a full cure time of about 5. So we have to move very quickly. We also use a pressure pot and apply about 40 to 60 pounds of pressure to prevent air bubbles. This is the biggest thing I found in molding is if you don't use a pressure pot, you will get bubbles. It's just one of those things. And here you can see on our right, we actually made a pressure pot out of a paint pot that we picked up from Harbor Freight for $90. And so it really can be for the at-home user. And then once the resin's cured, we very carefully open our molds. The one thing about resin that was hard for me to learn at first is that resin actually has a really big color shift. So 300 by Smooth On starts out clear, and then we add different purple and blue pigments and things, but it's going to transition to a lot paler than the pigment is, and so that was something that we had to come up with recipes and play around with color a lot so we could start getting colors that we liked. You can see here, these are the giraffes that have hardened and are ready to be pulled from their molds. And then another thing is this is an octopus. Like I was mentioning with the colors, we actually were able to start playing around with mixing colors together and getting kind of an interesting swirly look. You can also see on the edge of this octopus mold more of that cut that I was talking about, where it's very jaggedy at the edges and smaller towards the center. And then all of our toys, once we demold them, they need to get cleaned up. So you can see on the seahorse to the left and the octopus, he kind of has like a little extra plastic on the top of his head. All of that plastic needs to be clipped off, X-Actoed off, or hand sanded. We typically will make 20 to 30 toys at a time, sit down and seam them in group batches. Once we have them seamed, they have to get a bath. So because we put release on the molds to prevent the resin from sticking, that release will actually prevent the paint from sticking as well. So we wash all of our toys in a dishwashing detergent bath. So Cascade works really well, and it cuts the grease and removes the release and allows the paint to stick better. Once we have all of our toys cleaned and ready to be painted, we either give them a base coat of different colors or we leave them as the cast resin. These are some of the paints that we like. I prefer Timea. It's just personal preference. And every one of our toys gets clear coated post hand painting. Another thing that I thought was really important to mention is that resin and spray paints are extremely toxic, and you should always do these things in a properly ventilated area and wear a respirator. Resin is, especially the clearer the resin, the more toxic. So just if you're doing it at home, make sure that it's very well ventilated. I can't stress that enough. Here are some of our giraffes that have different paint coats. We've left some of them as just the resin, but you can see some have been spray painted with different metallics. Once we have a base coat we like, every single one of our characters has hand-painted eyes, hand-painted spots, hand-painted textures. Like Anne had mentioned, the watermelon will actually go in and hand-paint little green lines, little tiny black seeds. We did some Christmas ones where we hand-painted candy cane horns. So there's a lot of love that we put into each and every one of our toys. And you can see our cats even like to get involved. It's a big group effort. And here's some of our sharks that have been painted, and then they're ready for their clear coat. So we like to use a UV resistant clear coat to prevent chipping and keep all of our hand painting nice and intact. And then finally, once all of our parts are painted, we have to reassemble them. So once we take them apart, they need to be put back together. So you can see at the very top, the teeth have been cast in white, the tongue has been cast in pink, and then we painted the whale blue, and we left the bottom white as well. And this just helps keep the line clean and really sleek looking. We also offer a ton of accessories: top hats, mohawks, bunny ears, birthday hats. Each narwhal has the option of 3 donuts to place on his horn. And this is just the things that we feel makes our toys personal, not only to us, but to you as well. And then that's how we make our toys. If you have any questions, please think about it during the slideshow of our finished toys, and stay tuned at the end for what's next from Rawrz Toys. We like pirates and food. We're pretty motivated by food. Gummies, chocolate, donuts.
I was going to say, it seems like there's a constant sort of metaphor going on here with like edible. They look good enough to eat, really. Oh, there you go, exactly.
Yeah, we really just like food apparently, and that kind of motivates us.
But please don't eat our toys.
Yeah, don't eat them. They're really not fun for eating. This one was actually someone had requested, but ended up being one of my favorites. These are some of our superhero guys. We like to keep it super-tastic. And again, more candy. I guess food really does play a part in our toys. And gummies. Doo-doo-doo. Zombies. That's not candy. We offer 2 elephants, a boy and a girl, so one's slightly bigger. There's the donuts we mentioned, so they actually are removable, and you can stack 1 or 3 donuts. It's personal preference. Anne's the master of painting miniature donuts and cupcakes. That guy actually has pewter mixed into his resin, so that look comes from metal. And then here's some of our guys on top of the form. You can see these are the bigger guys that we had mentioned that we use as showpieces. And then back to you, Anne.
So here we just wanted to show a quick example of one of the larger form pieces being created. This is the display for the octopus. So fun fact about him, he uses 143 milliliters of material. His head is hollow. I printed him at 100 micron setting, and it took about 12 hours to print. And you'll see him with a hat later, and his hat was printed separately and glued on. Next, we have our giraffe, which is a larger figure, and he is 45 milliliters, also printed at 100 microns, and he took about 6 hours and 30 minutes to print.
So at the price of our resin, that comes out to be about $7.50 for that part.
And this just shows our regular line of toys next to our bigger line of toys and how cute they are.
Mm-hmm. So these are going to be debuting at Maker Faire, right?
Yeah, so we're going to be at Maker Faire, and we're going to have a Forum 1 printing, so come check out our booth. We'll also be at Forum at 5 o'clock on both days talking about our process, but we'll have all of our toys displayed as well as some bigger toys. So yeah, come check us out at Maker Faire. We're really excited about Maker Faire. It's our first time being an exhibitor there. And yeah, mostly the future of Rawrz Toys is Maker Faire is our next big show, and then we're going to be debuting another critter sometime soon. It remains to be seen what kind of critter that is, so please like us on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram, just at Rawrz Toys or facebook.com/Rawrz Toys. And yeah, we'd love to hear from you and any comments you might have. So thank you again.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, that was really great and really informative, and I'm super excited because we have a lot of questions to get to, and I can't wait to dig into that. I just want to pop through quickly just a few resources for anybody who's looking to get more information about our site or Rawrz Toys. So for us, you can find out other questions and answers through our forums at forums.formlabs.com. That's actually the place where we first saw Anne Victoria's prints, and we became huge fans instantly because they were one of the first adopters of our printer. We also have a support site where lots of people are sharing tips about printing and developing techniques for the Form 1. We also have 2 email addresses here, hello@Formlabs if you have questions about buying a Form 1, and support site, support@formlabs.com. So if you're a Form 1 owner, you can write in there if you've got questions. So at this point, I just want to say, please give us feedback on this webinar. We have a survey at formlabs.com/webinar, and this is really helps us out in terms of deciding what it is that we should, where we should go next, what kind of content everyone would like to see. We're really happy to make these presentations available, but getting some feedback just gives us a chance to pick out what people want to learn about. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to question and answer session. So I'm just going to throw up a couple of URLs on there, and this is actually a series of creatures that we just got in the mail. We're super excited about them, and we'll be featuring them at Maker Faire as well. So please come on out and hang out with everyone. So what I want to do is just open it up. We have a couple of questions here, and I'm going to start with some of the first ones. We have kind of a technical question about sprues from Tori, and the question is, how do you identify what portions of the toys should have an attachment? Also, how do you implement the puzzle style fitting for the attachments in the design process? So I think that's a bit of Victoria and a bit of Anne. So go ahead.
So the way that I determine where the sprues are going to be for casting process is if you look to the seahorse, for example, all of his fins and the tip of his nose, they would actually, if they didn't have a vent at the end of them, the liquid would flow to the point and air would get trapped. So I take any high point that might present an air bubble and I add a sprue there. So the tips of his fin, the tip of his tail, the tip of his nose, and every single tip of his fins will all get vents. And so really I determine that by deciding what high point would air get trapped.
And sometimes it sounds like you actually have vents between sections of the model, like say the tail connects to the nose, right?
Sometimes. It depends on like with the elephant, we did that. We had the trunk connected to the underside of his, the tip of his trunk connected to the underside of his trunk, but then the tips of his horns had different vents. The reason we decide to connect them or not is easeability of getting the casting out of the mold. So if we were to connect too many parts, it might actually prevent it from coming out of the mold cleanly. So although it would allow for the resin to flow easily, it wouldn't allow for us to remove it without having to cut it apart. So we would still make separate sprues in some cases. And then as for how we decide to split the object apart, it's really an aesthetic design choice as well as function, and I'll pass it back to Anne, and she can talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, in most cases, there's a fairly natural break where there's going to be an overhang, like the elephant ears were pretty easy to have a seam line there. And in our whale, it worked out perfectly because our split ends up being a nice design element as well. So I just angled the split to make it look like he has a white belly, or when we cast it in different colors, he can have any color belly. But it kind of adds a fun design element, actually, as well as very functional.
Awesome. So I have a question from one of our YouTube watchers. Iman asks, "Hi, I'm just wondering what you use for priming after sanding and before molding."
We use Plasticoat brand primer. They specifically have a sandable primer, and we prefer Plasticoat because it goes on thin, but it still has the ability to fill, and it's really easy to get a nice smooth finish. One of the secret insider tricks that I use is I actually take the primed objects to a buffing wheel, and I buff the primer after it's cured, and that gives it a really nice smooth finish.
Awesome. Yeah, it does seem like the priming is really key to getting that mold to come out well. So, here's a good one. CC asks, what did you use for your gummy prints?
For the gummy prints, we used a specific resin, 325, and I actually bought a bag of gummy bears and sat down with a bunch of different colors and sat there and made sure every color matched every single gummy bear. Little OCD attention to detail. And then the 325 is a smooth-on product. They also make a resin that's called crystal clear. The reason I didn't use that is that clear resin tends to be the most toxic. So the 325, although it has like a slight yellow tinge to it, because I was adding more warmer tones, it lent itself well to actually helping them be more gummy-like. And then another trick is we crystal clear them after, and that helps give the sheen, the gummy-like shimmer.
Do you just use a high gloss sheen, or do you use something a little bit more matte?
We actually use either Mod Podge gloss or Krylon gloss. Some of the toys that are the metallics, we prefer the satin finish, and that's to not take away from the metallicness of it. But yeah, Mod Podge gloss or Krylon gloss both work just as well.
Awesome. So we have one about hand painting. Sergio asks, do you hand paint all your models? Which I think you've answered. But he says, if hand painted, how do you handle large amounts if a particular figure is in high demand?
We do hand paint all of our toys, and if the way that we do it is we make them first, then put them online. So we don't make anything that people do order customs, but typically it's in a manageable way. We don't put a character that we don't have up for sale. That way we won't have to make 10 of them at one time. That's kind of how we control that.
Okay, awesome. I guess the last bit is, or the last question that I've got here is, what type of paints do you use for your toys, and is there a varnish process?
Yes, there is a varnish process. That's the crystal clear step at the end, which, like I had mentioned before, you can either use Mod Podge spray products or Krylon products. Krylon's a little bit thinner, so it provides a nicer finish, whereas the Mod Podge is a little bit thicker, so it's just slightly more durable. And we use, for spray painting the base coat, we use Tamiya spray paints. And then for the hand painting, we use acrylic hand paints. We prefer model color or Reaper paints. It's a Texas company, and they make Reaper paints are really great. They actually have a little bit of flex to them. And then, yeah, we just sit down with really tiny brushes and put on some bad movies and go to town.
The bad movies are an essential part of the process.
It really is. He thinks they're awesome, but my husband doesn't really agree.
Yeah, I mean, this has been really amazing. We're through for all the time that we've got today. So any of the other questions that we have, we'll try to answer in the YouTube comments, and people can certainly add them in later, and I think that Anna and Victoria might be looking through and be willing to post some answers there as well. I just want to thank you both for making the time to do this. I really feel like we got a look into a very professional and developed process and a lot of experimentation that's gone into this, and a lot of professional expertise, and I know this is going to be a great resource for a lot of folks. So thanks a lot for your help.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you for having us. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, and also I just want to thank everyone for watching, and stay tuned because we'll be announcing a new webinar pretty soon, and hopefully we'll be seeing folks at Maker Faire or SolidCon.